You're listening to the Sunny Days Podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, and coach specializing in subconscious reprogramming, inner child work, and intuition development to help you create your happiest, most fulfilling life. Thank you for tuning in on this sunny day. Hello, welcome to the Sunny Days Podcast. My name is Alex the Good Witch. I am your host, and today we're going to be talking about perpetuating the cycle. Of course, we talk a lot about breaking the cycle, but I think it's really important to tap into things or learn about things that are perpetuating the cycle, right? Because if we're continually perpetuating it, we're kind of working against ourselves as far as breaking it goes. So I'm going to dive into that today. I'm going to dive into something in particular that I see with perpetuating the cycle, a specific thing that a lot of us do and that I witness a lot, and that I work with a lot, that really has this perpetuating cycles when we have no idea that that's what we're doing. It's a very unconscious action, and being able to see this and be more aware of it actually helps break the cycle and is definitely a big step in doing so. So with that, let's dive right in. The specific thing that I'm wanting to talk about is that the more we try to avoid the cycle, the more we accidentally perpetuate it. I'm going to explain this with a couple of examples. So that's like my overall point, is that the more we're like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to do that. I don't want that to be my life. The more we find ourselves perpetuating it. So basically, the more we give this cycle power, like, I hated that and I don't want that for myself anymore, the more we're in that mindset, the more we perpetuate it. And again, I'll explain with examples, because obviously I'm not saying to go and be so excited about these like awful cycles, or just be like happy with them or complacent with them. That's not what I'm saying. So I'll just start with one example. So this one example is something I was actually watching on TV. I have other like real life examples. I just feel like this like played out very well. So don't tune. I'll be like, oh my God, she just saw this on TV. No. This is just like a really good example of it playing out, right? And then I can get into like personal ones, things like that. So this example, it was a reality show, obviously, or else it wouldn't really matter as much if it was just like a fiction show. So this guy was a young dad. He had like just had a baby, like literally like that day. And he was so into, like, I grew up in a family where there was no anger management. Like there was a lot of anger issues. And I was very controlled as a kid and getting the brunt of that anger. And I will not have that in this new family that I have. Right. So the intentions are great. Right. This thing that we do comes from like this good intentions of like, I don't want this. And that's what he was doing, is like, I don't want this. But then what was happening in real time was he was getting so angry at his fiance, like yelling at her, and very like unreasonably. She had just had like a C-section. He's like yelling at her. And she was like, oh, like, could you please wash your hands before you touch the baby? And he like freaked out, was yelling. He's like, you won't control me and I won't have this in my life, and was getting very angry. And then he was talking about it and he was like, I'm very upset because I see those things that I grew up with, that like trying to control me, right? And I won't be talked to like that. And I won't be told what to do. And I'm going to stop that. I'm going to not have this in my family right here, right now. Well, his attempts of stopping that and doing that was perpetuating it. Now he is the one putting anger into this family. He's the one putting controlling ness into his family. Because a couple of things, one of the things that's coming up is that when we have these cycles, they stem from this like conditioning, and this conditioning, until we really work on it and truly break these cycles, it's really all that we know. It's all our um toolbox really is, all of our repertoire of like what we have available to us to handle different things or to respond and react to different things. It's all we really know. So his attempts at stopping it, right? He's being very triggered by it. And this trigger makes him reach into his toolbox, and all that he knows is things like anger and controlling, because that's the environment that he grew up in, and he was taught that through like explicit circumstances, but this also happens a lot like subliminally being taught. He was taught that that's how you deal with the situation, and like that's the only way to do it or attempt to do it is through like anger and control. So that's all that he knew what to dig into in order to react or respond to the trigger, and try to will his way and get what he needs to feel safe. That's the only way he knew how to do that, right? Which isn't his fault. I'm just speaking on like why this happens. And then the other component too is the projection component. Because what happens when we have these cycles, when we have this conditioning, is that we like project that circumstance and that dynamic onto everything, right? So even from the get-go, when he got upset and was triggered by her asking him to wash his hands before touching the baby, he like projected onto that scene that she's controlling him, that she's telling him what to do, right? Whereas someone who doesn't have that exact conditioning or trauma or like cycle going on, that environment, they wouldn't necessarily project that onto that, right? If someone doesn't have that kind of wounding, that's a good word, someone doesn't have that kind of wounding, they would just be like, oh yes, that's, of course, that's what I'll do because I'm touching the baby and my hands are dirty. It wouldn't really be a thought in their mind. And then someone with other kind of wounding might take that in a whole other way, right? And that's what we do. We have all these projections onto the scenarios that constantly turn something that is not like our past into something that is like our past, because our brains really like things that are familiar to us. So it'll take an objective situation and it will spin it in order to resemble what we've been through before. And then it's like, ooh, we've been through this before. I know how to handle this. Let me reach in my back pocket and get the things that I know how to handle things with. And that is anger and controlling, for this example. So you can see how this continues on, because there's that projection of it. And then there's that, this is the only way I know how to deal with it, responses. And now you're creating it. But the intention from the get-go, keep in mind, was I don't want this. I don't want this for me, and I don't want this for my family. So it's super interesting how that is the intention, yet that's exactly what is created, like completely subconsciously. In this example, I'm not throwing this person under the bus or anything. I just thought it was a really good example that you could really like see play out in real time. And you're like, that's what happens, because I said, I see that. I've seen that within my own life and the work that I do, and I've seen it with clients, but I just thought that was a really like clear example of like, holy shit, you could see that like exact train of thought and everything just like play out. So this is a big part of when people say, I don't want to become my parents, right? That's such a big thing. It's like, I don't want to become my parents. I don't want to, have my kid, in this example, it does involve like having kids, but obviously, we can easily become our parents even without kids. I just think it's like a very big catalyst too, because now we are literally in the role of parent, like very directly. So regardless if you plan on having kids, you have kids now or not, this definitely applies to as well. It's just part of the example. So people all the time are like, I do not want to become my parents. I do not want my kid to grow up in the way that I grew up. And this could be on like an overall level, like everything about it. This could be like certain things, like, oh, my parents used to X, Y, and Z, and I'm not going to do that, right? So it might pick apart like certain things that you grew up with, certain ways that they acted or didn't act, and how you're going to do things differently, or it might be like the whole picture, right? But either way, this applies. So a lot of us think that, right? Whether it's a big picture, or whether it's just something that we didn't like, we didn't appreciate it, or ended up being harmful to us, that we have the intention to not do moving forward. Again, whether we have a kid or just like kind of being that way, being that kind of person, living our life that way. Well, as we see all the time, is that people who have that intention still end up becoming like their parents. And again, it's such a mind-boggling thing. It's so crazy. I don't like using that word, but it's just so crazy to see and to be a part of, like yourself, like having that within yourself and seeing that come out of you, and you're like, oh my God, I sounded exactly like my mom, when that's all like I wasn't wanting to be like that. How would that happen? Like, I had this whole intention of not being that way. And again, this stems from this perpetuating like practice I'm talking about, where it's trying so hard not to be that way, that you end up perpetuating it, because you're already projecting situations to be very similar to what you experienced in the past, because that's just what the brain does. And then on top of that, if you haven't worked with the actual breaking the cycles and the subconscious work that you need, that's all you've got. That's all you've got, is how your parents were, how your caretakers were, how those experiences were for you growing up. And what are the ways that they coped? What are the ways that they try to get what they want? What are the ways that they reacted to other people's strong emotions, et cetera, et cetera? That's all you've got in your back pocket. So even though consciously you're like, I don't want to be like this, I don't want to pass that on, subconsciously, when push comes to shove, especially when you're triggered, whether that trigger is actually something that was like your past and it's triggering that, or just like your own projection of it that then triggers that, you reach in your back pocket and it's exactly how your caretakers or your environment dealt with the situation. So now all of a sudden, you're the one yelling, or you're the one withdrawing, whatever that is for you, right? That's going to be, there's so many nuances to that, but that's what it's going to be. Okay, so getting deep here. This is my personal example. So my personal example is that a wounding that I have is not getting my emotional needs met, needing to cater to my one of my parents' emotional needs over mine, and that they took up my like capacity to be able to not only care for myself, but receive that from them, right? Like, I had to cater to their big emotions. So that is a wounding that I have. And from that wounding, I'm wanting deep down and desiring to have those emotional needs met. But at the same time, I would like project that they weren't being met, project onto situations that this person is prioritizing other things above my emotional needs, or that I am being put in a situation where I have to cater to their emotional needs over mine. Maybe it's because like I would choose people who maybe their emotions were like the house is on fire, and they would get really upset and big triggers, and therefore I had to continually mold and adapt to them to serve their upsetness, their big emotions, cater to their like tantrum, quote unquote. And therefore, I was never able to not only receive that from the other person, but have like the capacity to give that to myself. So it's so interesting because as much as I was like, I would never want to do that to other people. So this is a really good example of how it doesn't necessarily have to do with kids. It could also just be like, I would never want to do that to other people. And even thinking that like, I don't do that to other people. Like, why would I do that to other people? I hate it when it was done to me. That's something that's very important to me. I don't do that. And why would I ever do that? So it took my process with like reprogramming to really even see and notice that, oh my gosh, because I'm coming from that wounding, I actually do that to other people. It's so weird. Like it creates this cycle because this wound that I didn't feel like I was allowed to have the big needs, right? Because there was already the big needs of the parent. And I had to deal with that. So there was no room for me to have the big needs, especially like big emotional needs. So then now flash forward to what I didn't realize I was doing because I'm like, I would never do that to other people, right? I didn't like to do that with me, blah, blah, blah. I'm just being out here trying to not have that happen. I'm out here trying to not have that happen. And in me trying not to have that happen, that is what I was doing. Because what would happen is if someone else had a big need, I did not like that, right? Because it would signal to my brain that that means that I don't get to have my needs. There's not like room for the both of us. So I wouldn't allow this person to have their big need. So I would be like dismissive towards it, or just turn it around of like what I need. Like I wasn't like allowing and honoring their big need, because I was coming from the wounding where I I needed that. So it's so interesting because again, I'm coming from the place of I would never want to continue to do that. Or not continue, I would never want to do that, period. Like I felt like that wasn't necessarily quote unquote right. And I didn't like when it was done to me. Of course, I'd never do that to anyone else. But in me not wanting to do it to anyone else, like not wanting to have that cycle be a thing, I was subconsciously making it a thing. And it took me a long time to realize that I was actually perpetuating it. And what also really helped me realize that is that once I saw it happening with me and like, it's like a person, I was like, oh my gosh, if I were to have a kid, right, as much as consciously, I'm like, I would support all their needs. I'm like a very grounded person and I am very emotionally stable and I'm able to take care of myself and take care of them and be super present, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I know all this about me consciously, but I realized that that's exactly what would come up is that the child would end up having very big needs as they do. And consciously, I'm like, yeah, and I can be even better about it than what I experienced. But subconsciously, I was not there. Subconsciously, that would trigger that cycle within me, and that would cause me to reach into my back pocket from a place of that wounding, where it's like this this town ain't big enough for the both of us. Like you don't get to have those big needs. That makes me uncomfortable because it makes me feel like I don't get to have my needs met. Um, and then I'm coming from that uncomfortable place and I'm putting whatever on you, whether that would be like shame or controlling, or hush hush or like invalidating or making my needs seem more important, whatever that is. Would probably be similar to how I experienced it. That's what would inevitably unfold, right? And I was able to see that path more clearly once I was able to see it between me and this person and how their big needs made me uncomfortable. And then subconsciously, in order to preserve myself, in order to quote unquote not continue the cycle and like not like I won't stand for my needs not being met. I won't stand for my needs not being honored and valued and heard. Me having that stance actually invalued, invalidated, and didn't honor, didn't give the space for someone else's needs. And I then just did that to them. So that's exactly how that works with whatever the cycle, the pattern is. It's like a combination of that projection, but then also how you deal with it is how the other quote unquote other people dealt with it towards you. Hope that makes sense. So, what do we do now? So the thing is that like I said, it starts with this intention, this really good intention of like, this stops here. This stops with me. I don't want this to continue happening. I don't want to be like that when I grow up. I don't want to be this way towards other people, towards my kid or future kids. Right. I don't want this. It starts from that really good intention, but then it turns into what it turns into. So my advice for this, to take this and actually step towards breaking the cycle instead of taking this and then now you end up just perpetuating the cycle, is to see that this cycle already lives in you. It already lives in you. It may be tricky to do because the cycle and like the components of the cycle we see as is really bad and really harmful, etc. And I'm not saying that they're not. And I'm not saying that it lives in you and that you are exactly those people and you act exactly like I say those people because it could be whatever, your parents or caretakers, whatever that was, whatever your relationship is with them. It does not mean that you are those people, right? Like you are still you, but you have to have that awareness that that cycle lives in you. Because once you have that awareness, now you can actually do something about it. But the problem is a lot of people are like, I don't want to become my parents. And I'm going to do everything in my power to not. And like I said, from that stance, you end up literally being them. Like that's just exactly what happens. You end up being them, ironically, even though your whole intention, your whole motivation was to not, you end up being them. Because you thought that you didn't already have that. You thought that you could stop it. And you weren't aware of the ways that you are being like that. That's part of the problem, is that ignorance to how that already shows up for you. And it's okay to see that. It doesn't need to be shameful. It's not your fault, right? But it is your responsibility to do whatever you'd like to do about it. It could be nothing, but it's still, although it's not your fault, it's your responsibility. Like you have to respond to it. You can choose to do nothing, you choose to work on it. But being able to see how that already lives in you, like you're not going to get anywhere without that awareness of how you already have that cycle like flowing through you and how that comes up in small ways, whether that's towards people, whether that's just like how you treat yourself or your own thought process. Like you have to be aware of how it's already there, because without that awareness, it's just subconsciously running the show in the background and it's hidden from you and it's secret. And it can do that all day long without your knowing. And then one day you might wake up and be like, oh my God, like, how did I get here? It could be, how did I get here? Or how did I become this person? But that waking up, it might all catch up to you later and be like, how the hell did I end up in this same kind of situation? Or how did the hell did I end up becoming the same kind of person or doing these same kind of things? So you have to see how it already lives within you. And that is how you step towards breaking the cycle rather than perpetuating the cycle, even with the really good conscious intentions. Because remember, it is a subconscious game that we're playing. So I love the conscious intentions, and that's awesome. And that's beautiful and that's great. But in order to do something with those conscious intentions, you have to do things with the subconscious, because the subconscious is really running the show. So I love the intention for everyone, and I definitely salute you. But if that's a journey that you want to take, I definitely recommend seeing where it lives within yourself and understanding that this is a subconscious game that you are not to blame for, but you are a participant in, whether you decide to take that journey or not. Okay, so I hope that this was helpful. I just felt very called to talk about this specifically. And I do want to invite you as well. If you are wanting to take this journey, I do offer one-on-one coaching. I always have a limited amount of spots left. So it just depends on my schedule, how many clients I have currently, the other things that I have going on. So that all varies, but it's on my website. I'll put the link in the show notes. And a big thing that we work on is subconscious reprogramming, is what's called parts work, as well as inner child work. But I also do a lot of different things with clients. It's very much specific to you, what you're wanting, what you're going through, whether your goals are something like tangible, like I want this certain kind of relationship, or I want to like quit my job, I want to find my soul purpose, or intangible, or just like I just know that like I can make a better life and I can feel better, and I know that that's out there for me. I don't know exactly what that is, but I know that that's there, and like that's why I'm here, is to get on that path. We can do that as well. So it's just a really big and powerful way to decide that you are going to put your whole self into the path that is just amazing. It's amazing for you. It's something that you were really meant to experience and move towards, and just like have this life that is beyond what you were put into. I strongly believe that we're all put into this life, and we weren't meant to leave this life experiencing the same kind of things. We weren't meant to just leave this life feeling the same kind of ways, or feeling like it was all like a replay, or again, it was just like a similar life than where we were placed. I believe that we were placed in a certain life to break through with it and get to the quote unquote like real life. Not that this hasn't been real life, but like that dream reality, the life that's like really meant for you. So if life feels off, if things about your life feel wrong, it's because there is a right life for you. There is like a better life that exists. There's something that is really resonating and calling to you. You're not meant to just stay and settle and be stuck. You're not meant to do that at all. It's not meant to be punishment. It's meant to direct you. It's meant to let you know, like, hey, this feels off and wrong, because it is off and wrong. So like, let's go, let's go to where, you know, is better, where we want you to go and where you're really meant to go. So, yeah, that's a lot. That's like the big picture of what I do with one-on-one coaching. And then, like I said, it depends on, you know, who you are and what you're wanting as far as the practices and modalities that we actually get into. So definitely check that out in the show notes. And if you're interested, hopefully I have some availability, or I can get you on the wait list. And I would love to see you around. So follow me on Instagram. I thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you get to grab a lot more free content from me, and I hope you all have a very sunny day. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.